Hi everyone and welcome to week 3 of our distance learning for BizMan Area Study 2 Managing Employees. Today we move on to the role of participants in the workplace. So essentially it's an introduction into the final part of managing employees, looking at industrial relations. So just a pretty quick video today going over the different participants within the workplace. So VCAR says in their key knowledge point in the study design that the roles of participants in the workplace, including human resource managers, employees, employer associations, unions, and the Fair Work Commission. So they're the five that they mention. Obviously, they talk about employers, but the human resource manager is the representative of the employer, so he is covered under that point. So they're the five that we focus on in the study design. So what are we learning today? I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to go through Ed Rollo and pick out the key points within Ed Rollo that I think you need to follow. Ed Rollo actually cover this industrial relations topic extremely well. So to make sure that you guys are following through the slides, I've gone through, reordered them, and I'll add my voice to the slides. You've all complained that the guy who does the voiceovers through Ed Rollo does get a bit boring. I'm probably even more boring, but you'll have to put up with my voice to some of the Ed Rollo slides today covering this particular topic. So the first slide that we're going to cover today in roles of participants in the workplace is the relationship between employees and employers. So you've got the employees here with their objectives in the workplace. They want to earn an income, they want good conditions of employment, and they want their job security. All getting back to our motivation theories, we all know that we know that. Employer, on the other hand, their business objectives are to make a profit, increase market share, fulfill a market social need, meet shareholder expectations. So between those, we've got a picture here of a seesaw. So we're constantly trying to balance the employer objectives and the employee objectives. And the person that does that in the workplace is the human resource manager on behalf of the employer. He manages the function. So his objective is to keep the peace and ensure that both sets of objectives are achieved. So even though he's employed by the employer, his role also is to ensure that the employees achieve the objectives that they want to achieve. And if you see on the slide there, you've got this little orange box, different ways that the employees and the employers can go about achieving their objectives within the workplace if they aren't happy with their current agreements, etc. There are strikes, there are go slows, there's work to rule, there are pickets, sabotages, and lockouts. So they're all things that come um, uh, under the study design that you don't need to know them all, but they're just tactics that can be done or can be used during a. So the first participant in the workplace who's not mentioned in the study design, but obviously is pretty important, is the employer. We've seen before just that its objective is to make a profit, increase market share, fulfill a market social need, and meet his shareholder expectations. But the employer's roles also to ensure that they provide the safe and healthy workplace. They comply with their legal regulations. They provide appropriate training for employees to make sure that their employees can do the job that they're employed for. And they need to pay their employees appropriately and meet the working conditions of the national minimum standards. So it's a pretty important role that the employer has in the workplace. Obviously, as we've mentioned, the employer is represented by the human resource manager in all things to do with his employees in the workplace. So they're involved, the human resource manager, involved with the ongoing management of the employee-employer relationship. They need to negotiate with employees and or representatives of the employees. We'll see who they are shortly about pay and working conditions. They act as a mediator between the interests of employers and employees. They develop grievance policies to make sure that disputes are resolved calmly and quickly. If they're not, they affect productivity within an organisation, and they ensure that legal minimums for wages, conditions and safeties are met. They're probably more an expert about the employment standards and employment contracts and enterprise bargaining agreements than the employer is. So they've been employed, human resource managers, to be on top and be the expert in those particular area on behalf of the employer. So they're an important part of workplace relations. So on one side you've got the employer, and then you've got the human resource manager who's employed by the employer. On the other side you've then got the employees. So we know their employee objectives are to earn income and job security and good conditions of employment, etc. And they want to have career advancement to be fully motivated if we believe in Maslow's hierarchy. So, but what they need to do within the workplace, what they're required to do, they need to perform their duties with care and diligence. They need to follow the safety procedures. They need to obey lawful and reasonable order within the terms of contract of employment. So don't do anything unlawful. They need to serve faithfully, account for all money or property received, and not misuse confidential information. So they have a big responsibility rather than not. It's not just turning up and doing the job. They have these ongoing responsibilities as part of their contract of employment. So when it comes time to negotiate enterprise bargaining agreements, workplace agreements, all that sort of thing, often the employer is represented by, if they're in a particular industry, they may be represented by employer associations who represent who similar type businesses within an organisation. So if you see this slide, it's the Australian Retailers Association. So there are employer associations. They unite to promote their common interests as well, to share information, advice and support for each other. So in this situation, you've got the Australian Retailers Association, who they're the peak body representing Australia's more than $300 billion sector, which employs more than 1.2 million people. So they may not be involved directly in negotiations at the workplace level of one particular employer. That would depend on the actual size of that particular organisation, but they will provide specific advice and guidance in the structure of contracts that may be used at the workplace to ensure that productivity is increased as much as possible through these collective bargaining agreements. So on one side of the equation, you have peak bodies representing employers, so these employer associations. Now on the employee side, when it comes to negotiating these enterprise agreements, you'll have unions involved in the workplace. So they're an organisation formed to represent and protect the rights of employees in a particular industry. So when it comes to negotiating a particular agreement, you will have the unions works or in negotiating on behalf of all the workers in that particular area. The employees themselves don't have to negotiate individually the collective bargaining agreement. So strength in numbers. So it is normally a union who is representing workers from a particular workplace, or again from a particular industry, such as the teaching industry. When it comes round to negotiating new enterprise bargaining agreements at that particular point, it will be the teaching unions who negotiate on behalf of the teachers across the state for those particular agreements. That the individual teachers would then have to agree and vote that they approve the changes that have been negotiated, but it's the unions who are involved in that particular process. In the bigger organisations, you have what's called a shop steward, or a representative of the union. They're not employed by the union. They will be definitely a member of the union, but they're there to act as a local go-to person for the employees within an organisation on all things to do with union matters or any grievances that they may have in relation to their employment. They can go to a representative of the union as a person to support them as they go through. So representation, advice, the contract bargaining we've spoken about, and the shop steward organises the employees into a collective, so there's a united action if there's any particular issues that require further action. Finally, there's the Fair Work Commission. So important participant in the workplace. They're Australia's national workplace tribunal. So this is where things end up if collective bargaining agreements can't be negotiated in the workplace. It often ends up at the Fair Work Commission for determination. So they're independent. They've got the power to carry out a range of functions. Um, some of the key areas that they do provide, the Fair Work Commission, they provide a safety net of minimum conditions, including minimum wages and awards, so which we'll look at tomorrow. They facilitate the good faith bargaining and making of enterprise agreements at the workplace. Their role is to ensure that this happens, that enterprise agreements are put into place because they can see the benefits for employees in improved wages and employers in productivity improvements by having enterprise agreements rather than relying on minimum conditions which they establish. So if there's unfair dismissal, it ends up going to the Fair Work Commission to see whether there's a case for unfair dismissal. They regulate how industrial action is taken. They have to approve industrial action for it to take place and be lawful. They also resolve a range of other workplace disputes, whether it be through conciliation or mediation, and acting as in a court type role if no other agreements can be made between the parties. So they've got a very important role within the workplace, and they're the glue which sticks all the other parts together in workplace or enterprise bargaining within the Australian economy. So that's it for today's lesson. Here's the work for the lesson. It's covering sections 4.9 and 4.10 within the text. The questions to complete are sections 4.9, questions 1 to 6, and then questions 9 and 10, and sections 4.410, questions 5 to 7. It's interesting that the textbook just finally, it divides the workplace participants up into internal and the external environment. Yes, it's okay, that's fine, but it doesn't actually appear anywhere in the study design for Business Management Year 12 to talk about internal and external environments. So what it does is it's assumed knowledge from Year 11 that you know about internal and external environments, but there's no need to actually quote it as you go along and do your questions um, because because it's all covered in units 1 and 2. So anyway, have a work through those questions. Again, if there's any problems, whack them up on the discussion boards on your class page of myself or Mr. McAllister, or catch up with us in a Google Hangout. So until tomorrow, enjoy your day, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye for now.